President Obama made a surprise appearance in the White House briefing room Friday and spoke with unusual candor about race. Mr. Obama's father was Kenyan and his mother was white. He said George Zimmerman's acquittal earlier this month in the killing of Trayvon Martin has caused a lot of pain for African Americans.
There are very few African American men in this country who haven't had the experience of being followed when they were shopping in a department store. That includes me. There are very few African American men who haven't had the experience of walking across the street and hearing the locks click on the doors of cars. That happens to me, at least before I was a senator.
The president said many black Americans believe that if a white teenager had been involved in the same incident, the outcome and aftermath might have been different. He said the issue calls for some soul searching.
The question, for me at least, and I think for a lot of folks, is where do we take this? How do we learn some lessons from this and move in a positive direction?
The president suggested a review of some state and local laws and law enforcement procedures, as well as increased efforts to mentor African American boys and more candid conversations on racial issues. But he said conversations with his daughters remind him that each successive generation of Americans is making progress.
When I talk to Malia and Sasha, and I listen to their friends and I see them interact, they're better than we are. They're better than we were on these issues.
Despite being the first African American president, Mr. Obama has often avoided speaking about race, according to some experts. Michael Fontroy is Associate Professor of Public Policy at Washington's Howard University. He says many African Americans are disappointed that the president has not addressed their community's issues more.
You know, I've been critical of the president in many respects, and I acknowledge that there are some contextual political constraints. I'm just not convinced he's done all that he can within the context of those constraints to advance some of these issues.
Still, Mr. Obama said that if the killing of Trayvon Martin can bring greater efforts to confront some of America's racial issues, it would be what he called a pretty good outcome from what was obviously a tragic situation. Klein, VOA News, the White House.